So I filmed a video recently about parents of adult children. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, which is Psychology in Seattle. Dr. Kirk Honda, he is a professor and a therapist. He was talking about oppositional defiant disorder, which is like, imagine an extremely disruptive kid, basically, to the point that it's diagnosable. Okay, so kids that out here wilding out, they actually have a disorder that's science. This is a bad idea. They actually have a disorder that they can diagnose the extreme versions of that. Okay, anyway. In that last video, I was talking about this concept that for some reason parents are like, why are you blaming me for how you are? And it's time for you to take responsibility for how you are to their adult children. However, they only seem to say that when it comes to the negative attribute that their children are experiencing. I have yet to see a parent of an adult child that says, why are you blaming me for how you are? Why don't you take full responsibility for yourself when the adult child is doing something positive or has done something that they or society says is successful? I've never seen it. On the Psychology in Seattle podcast, Dr. Honda actually referenced a study called The Contribution of Parenting Practices and Parent Emotion Factors in Children at Risk for Disruptive Behavior Disorders, to basically see if there is a correlation between the way you parent and your ability to be emotionally present and the fact that you have a kid that's wilding out. And you know why it correlates to my video about parents of adult children? Because if you have a kid that's wilding out, they grow up. They grow up. If you are a disruptive and deregulating parent, do you contribute heavily to your kid being disruptive and deregulating and then turning into an adult that's disruptive and deregulating? Okay, full disclosure and like spoiler, like in my mind I'm like duh to the answer of this, but anyway, I think I will share this because some people will listen more to science than they will to common sense. So this is what Dr. Honda said in his video. Parenting practices defined by inconsistent discipline and corporal punishment, which means hitting, right, were associated with development of serious child problem behaviors and emotional dysregulation. Dr. Honda himself added on, corporal punishment in itself may not be bad, but corporal punishment is associated with other parenting practices like criticizing your children, putting them down, and other issues. Parents like that would have to ask themselves, why do they become so out of control that they would need to use that type of punishment? Now, I know in our community, that's crazy for me to say it, but we're here now. So he's saying hitting your kid in of itself is not proven to cause disruptiveness. However, if you're the type of person that hits your kid, you're probably also the type of parent that does a bunch of other maladaptive things like criticizing, putting them down, etc. And the question he would ask is, what makes you get so deregulated that the only way that you can parent this child is by smacking them? You don't have any other tools in your toolbox. I remember years ago, I said something about how I don't believe in hitting your children, and people were like, what? But if you don't hit them, what you gonna do? And as with many things, people always say to me, well, wait till you get to be XYZ age. People told me, you're not going to be able to go natural. Wait till you actually grow it. I get that from people all the time. And oftentimes what I will do is I will actually take what they're saying into account because they might be right. So either Zion wasn't born and they were like, wait till you have kids, you'll change your mind. Or Zion was a baby and they were like, oh, wait till he gets older, you'll change your mind. Now, yes, I have extenuating circumstances because my son has medical situations, but he's still a 9-year-old. And as you can hear in there, verbal and wilding out. The older I get, the more I don't understand. I'm not judging anybody. You do you. Them is your children. Okay. You do what you can do. I'm saying for me and mine. As a mom right now, when I look at my son, I literally can't fathom hitting him. The next thing that the study found is when parents have depression, anxiety, and stress. It was found to be a significant predictor of disruptive behavior and emotional difficulties in children, which makes me super sad because as a person with depression, anxiety, and stress, that probably manifested more in my past, like my early mothering, than it has in the second half of Zion's life. That breaks my heart. You don't want anything to happen to your kids, right? But as human beings, things are going to happen. Like, that's part of parenting. If you have stress, you're not going to have the resources for taking care of yourself and then not be able to take care of your child. So basically, you haven't employed the resources that you need. Either you don't or you can't. So how in the world are you then going to be able to take care, of a kid? I mean, that makes perfect sense. I follow this lady. She's a therapist. Most parents are not making sure that their needs are met. so that they can in turn show up for their children. Well. So it's basically in line with what this study says, which is, and listen, I'm not judging parents, I'm just saying the things aloud, especially if you're a parent that wants to grow, expand, show up differently for yourself. You know what I mean? Put on your mask first and then assist and parent from a more whole, healed, and insightful space. Let's keep going. Parent emotional coaching was associated with fewer disruptive behavioral problems. When your child has an emotion and you coach them as to how to handle said emotion, that was associated with fewer behavioral problems. Because as a parent, you're the education ground for this child to learn how to do life like that in this finite time that you have them. They don't even know what to call the emotion. And so you coach them and say, are you upset? Are you frustrated? And in their mind, they're thinking, oh, that's what this is called. I was just having a tantrum, but there's a name for this. And then you say, you know what? I would be upset too. And then you tell them what they can do when they're upset, or you tell them what they can do when they're frustrated, or you can tell them what they can do when they feel left out or when they're sad. That type of coaching is associated with diminished disruptive behaviors. You have to know what to do with the emotions yourself before you can coach someone. So I think where we run into it is exactly what the previous point I was making was. A lot of parents can't even articulate what they're feeling. They're having a tantrum. So when their child is having a tantrum, which is age appropriate, they're having a non-age appropriate tantrum, and their child tantrum exacerbates their tantrum, and they can't coach them. They can't be the parent and solid in their mature place because they're dysregulated too. Parent emotional dismissing predicted an increase in child disruptive behavior. So basically when parents dismiss your emotions entirely, that is correlated with an increase of your child wilding out. I mean, hello, Caribbean culture. Once again, I'm not blaming anybody because I don't think that Caribbean parents had their emotions validated, which is why they can't coach you, right? Because they can't even articulate what they feel. They don't even know. Did they actually parent you from a place of knowledge and self-insight, or did they just keep you alive because that's what their parents did, right? Maybe their emotions were dismissed, and so they just think that's what you do. Now they don't understand that their dismissed emotions is why they over there having a tantrum, but that's their work to do. Your work to do is to understand that if you are having a tantrum, you need to do the work to start taking care of yourself so that you can meet your child from a different healed place. Next, the study also found children whose parents provided positive emotional expression and supportive responses to their emotion were less likely to exhibit disruptive behavior due to their tendency to engage in effective self-regulation. One of the things that I work on when I'm coaching my clients is self-regulation, because you can't take it for granted that adults know what emotion they're feeling, can even identify it, have words to call it, and know how to self-soothe. You cannot take that for granted, especially if they come from a family of origins where none of that was modeled to them. It would make sense that they don't have it. And so if they're getting negative results in their life, sometimes you have to do a lot of work with the client so that they can discover and learn how to do that kind of stuff, so they show up in their world differently, whether it's any relationship they have that can include parenting. Okay, next, negative parent affect predicted child emotional regulation and inability to cope. Let me see what the definition of affect actually is. Definition. Catch a vibe. Affect is any experience of feeling or emotion ranging from suffering to elation, from the simplest to the most complex sensation of feeling, and from the most normal to the most pathological emotional reactions. What? Often described in the term of positive or negative affect, both mood and emotion are considered affective states. That is a lot of words. The vibe, the reaction or the response that the person gives you. Tone, your facial expressions, your verbal cues. Let me give you an example. If I say something to you like, oh my God, I got a raise on my job, and I go, oh wow, that's wonderful. Do you see that? That's a very flat affect. Whereas if I say, oh my God, that's great, that's amazing, that's a very positive affect. It's a vibe. So anyway, when the negative parental affect, which means flatness or a lot of scowling and tone and the parent is always angry, agitated all the time, they're mad. That can actually correlate with your child being disrupted and inability to cope. In order to help children who have oppositional behaviors, clinicians must work with the parents. I'm such a nerd, you guys. Yes, I sit here and I read this kind of stuff. And yes, I actually started a psychology degree. I never finished it. And your girl might, because the version of me that existed back then that started the degree was dissociated. Whereas the version of me right now, I'm studying psychology just for fun. So anyway, do with that as you will, as a child who has parents and as a parent who has children. If that information helps you find your light, I'm happy to provide it. Leave your questions and comments down below and I'll see you in the next video. And until the next video, be well, be encouraged. Here's a pineapple. Bye, you guys.